superhero movies finally getting boring? Once upon a time, superheroes used to rule Hollywood. These movies weren't just popular, they used to be a global event. We all remember people lining up outside theaters and cons, seats filled with cosplayers, fans cheering when their favorite hero finally showed up on the screen. From Spider-Man swinging through New York to Batman growling in the shadows to Iron Man snapping his fingers, superheroes weren't just a genre. They were the cultural heartbeat of the 2000s and 2010s. But that has now changed. Okay, be honest, how many superhero movies have you skipped lately? Don't worry, because you're not alone. It feels like every month there's another cape, another multiverse, another world-ending cosmic event. And at this point, even diehard fans are like, ugh, do I really have the energy for this? Box office numbers are shrinking. Every superhero flick isn't hitting the cool $1 billion like it used to. And some of them aren't even making their money back. The audience isn't as hyped. The social media isn't buzzing like before. Fans and reviewers are throwing around words like superhero fatigue or the end of an era. So what happened? Let's break it down. In today's video, we're talking about the rise of the superhero movies and the eventual fall of the superhero genre and whether or not it can actually bounce back. The recent golden age of the superhero movies might have boomed after Iron Man, but superheroes had made their presence known even before that, albeit with a mixed record. There were moments of success like Richard Donner's classic Superman in 1978 and Tim Burton's 1989 darker gothic Batman, both of which proved comic book films could be huge blockbusters. The 90s were a little rough and studios didn't quite know how to handle superheroes, making them either too campy or too grim. Plus, the technology just wasn't there yet. But things began to change in the 2000s. Fox's 2000 X-Men was a sleek, stylish epic which made comic book movies cool again. Hugh Jackman's Wolverine became iconic. The movie had two beloved sequels that are still very rewatchable. Then 2 years later, Sam Raimi dropped Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire playing a relatable underdog, and it was a massive hit. As was Spider-Man 2, which many fans still consider the best superhero movie ever. These movies proved that superheroes weren't just kid cartoons, they were for everyone. 2008 was the year that changed the genre forever. On one hand, Christopher Nolan released The Dark Knight, which became an instant classic. Christian Bale's Batman and Heath Ledger's Joker both became legendary. Superhero films turned from guilty pleasure to serious art. On the other side was Marvel. In 2008, Marvel, wanting to be an independent studio, took their biggest gamble with Iron Man. They had been on the verge of bankruptcy, having sold off their most popular IPs like Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, and X-Men to other studios, and watching them become successful movies throughout the 90s and the noughties. They wanted to get in the action, but they were left with a slew of their B-list superheroes like Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, and Black Widow. And against all odds, they decided to bet on the B-listers. Under Kevin Feige, they took a gamble with Iron Man by self-financing the movie and casting a risky actor like Robert Downey Jr. They probably thought they might sell some DVDs and maybe some merch, but their bet paid off manyfold, and the movie ended up giving birth to one of the biggest franchises of our time. Bad movies, great scenes, 7 receipts. Over the next 4 years, Iron Man was followed by The Incredible Hulk, Thor, and Captain America: The First Avenger, all building towards a shared superhero universe glued together by Nick Fury, interconnected stories, and post-credit scenes, culminating in The Avengers in 2012, proving that the shared universe model could work, smashing box office records and making Marvel one of the biggest brands in Hollywood. A golden age of superhero movies was born, and Kevin Feige had struck gold, and Marvel had cracked the genre and perfected the formula. relatable characters, action, humor, and interconnected storylines. It won't be wrong to say that from 2012 to 2019, the Marvel Cinematic Universe was a global phenomenon, with hits like The Guardians of the Galaxy, Captain America the Winter Soldier, and Black Panther, which made cultural history. The Infinity Saga comprised of a total of 23 films and 3 phases and culminated into a blockbuster two-partner with Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. 2 of the highest grossing movies of all time. And it wasn't just Marvel. DC scored huge with The Dark Knight Rises in 2012. Zack Snyder launched the DCEU with Man of Steel and later Batman vs. Superman. While controversial, these films still built passionate fan bases and showed a grittier alternative to Marvel's quippy style. Fox, before Disney bought them, pushed boundaries with films like Logan and Deadpool. Sony, after the Raimi trilogy, rebooted their franchise with Andrew Garfield as the Amazing Spider-Man. Success of something always means more and more people will attempt to follow. The box office was gradually flooded with superhero movies, some of which even enjoyed moderate success, but none of which were able to emulate what Marvel had done so well by creating a cinematic universe. But every crescendo must eventually come down. Marvel faced its biggest challenge after peaking with Endgame. How do you top the ultimate crossover? What do you do after you've already saved the universe? It was here that they began to drop the ball. Iron Man was gone, Cap had retired, Black Panther's future was tragically uncertain after Chadwick Boseman's passing. Marvel was suddenly adrift. They tried to pass the torch with newer characters like Eternals, Shang-Chi, and She-Hulk, a new Captain America, a new Hawkeye, and hey, some of those stories had heart, but none of them had the cultural gravity of Tony Stark or Steve Rogers. You can't replace a decade of emotional investment overnight. Then came the flood. Movies and Disney Plus shows dropping back to back. WandaVision, Loki, Falcon, and the Winter Soldier, Hawkeye, Moon Knight. At first, fans were excited, but soon Marvel ended up becoming a giant sprawling beast, and the audience was soon overwhelmed. It all began to feel like homework. You couldn't just watch the movies anymore. You had to keep up with the shows just to understand the next plot line. You skip WandaVision, then you're lost in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. You miss Loki, and Quantumanium doesn't even make sense. Your movies won't make sense unless you pay out of pocket for the subscription service and invest a substantial amount of time to watch all of these shows. The initial excitement began to falter even for the diehard fans, and the casual fans began to peace out. The oversaturation was not just limited to the Marvel shows and movies. By this time, DC and Sony too were beginning to pump out their superhero movies. It was the same thing over and over, and the audience was starting to get tired. The quantity skyrocketed, but the quality dropped. Scripts were rushed, characters underdeveloped, CGI shoddy. The spectacle felt hollow. The genre that once thrilled the audience was now drowning them. It wasn't like Marvel was doing any better. By this time, the Marvel formula was starting to show cracks. For years, they had ruled the box office with their lighthearted, quippy characters, CGI-heavy third act, tease the next movie post-credits. But by Phase 4, the audience was beginning to feel like it was all the same. While Marvel was leaning into quippy comedy, everything about DC became dark and brooding with endless slow motion and operatic music. Smart takes and lists at likecine.com. When you can predict the beats of the next movie before it actually happens, the magic fades. Instead of surprise, it started to feel like fast food. Quick, familiar, but not exactly special. And don't even get me started on the CGI. The quantity of movies increasing meant the quality was sure to fall. We all remember how good the effects looked in most of the Infinity Saga movies. Now, compare that to the floating heads in Thor: Love and Thunder and cartoony sets in Quantumania. Marvel was pumping out so much content that VFX studios were drowning in deadlines. Artists spoke about burnout, rushed schedules, and it showed. What's worse was that studio executives were okaying this subpar work. The once jaw-dropping visuals were now becoming meme material. Too many movies also meant too many threads. The once clean, simple world building became increasingly messy with the introduction of multiverse, Kang, incursions, variants, and secret wars. The villain arc with Kang collapsed after real-world controversies with Jonathan Majors. And let's face it, Thanos was always a much better villain than Kang. The big picture now felt fuzzy, nothing to tie all of these threads together. And outside of Marvel, the genre itself was collapsing. DC was rebooting every other year. The Flash, which was supposed to reset DC, stumbled instead into uncanny valley cameos and messy storytelling. Sony was giving us meme-worthy flicks like Morbius and Madam Web. There was also the fact that the audience had other options to invest their energy into with big fantasy like House of the Dragon and sci-fi epics like Dune. Even video game adaptations like The Last of Us were starting to steal the spotlight. Superheroes were no longer the only game in town. Plus, there was the fact that COVID-19 effectively changed the whole entertainment landscape. Theaters as a business were deeply affected. After spending years in quarantine, which in itself had caused the end of theater going as it once used to be, the people were now much more likely to stay at home. Couple that with the rise of the streaming services, which give the people the freedom to watch whatever they want in the safety of their homes. This was a major reason many people preferred to stay home and wait a few months for the movies to land on a streaming service to watch it. The world has become a much scarier place post-COVID, with the aftershocks of a global pandemic, political unrest, climate anxiety, several ongoing wars and conflicts. All are reasons people sometimes want different stories. Formulaic, quippy superhero movies stopped being the universal escape they once used to be. So, did superheroes crash and burn? Not exactly. Did we completely stop caring about them? Not really. They're still here, but they're not invincible anymore. Box office success isn't guaranteed, the fans are pickier, the hype isn't automatic, but here's the thing, superheroes are our modern day myths, and they are not gonna go away. What they need is reinvention and more relatable themes, smaller, riskier stories, better writing, less CGI sludge, and more emotional core. For example, the latest Superman by James Gunn, that has managed to win hearts and spark debates globally. Because when a superhero story works, when it manages to make us laugh, cry, and believe in something bigger than ourselves, that, my friends, is the best feeling in the world. The genre isn't dead, but like the heroes themselves, maybe all it needs is a rebirth. So, what do you think? Do you think superheroes are dead and gone, or is it just a rough patch before their resurrection? Let us know in the comments, and until next time.